The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. In the lead-up to this year's federal election, Midcoast Morning is bringing you interviews with our local candidates in the Nanaimo-Ladysmith Riding. There are 5 candidates on the ballot, each of whom ran in the 2021 federal election. Last time on the show, we heard from Paul Manley, representing the Green Party, and Michelle Corfield, our local Liberal candidate. We begin today's program with a conversation with incumbent Lisa Marie Barron, representing the NDP. I am joined in the CHLY studio by Lisa Marie Barron. Thank you so much for coming down here. As our incumbent MP, what would you say to the voters of Nanaimo as far as why they should send you back to Ottawa and give you another chance?
Yeah, well, so great to be here. Always love coming down and supporting local radio and all that our local journalists are doing. Well, first of all, I just love the work that I'm doing, and there's so many reasons why, I'd love to be able to continue doing so. So, as the incumbent coming in, I have a proven track record. My focus has remained on making sure that people in our communities are at the forefront. I don't know about you, but prior to getting elected in 2021, it became very evident to me that we've had successive Liberal and Conservative governments that have been lining the pockets of big corporations, finding tax avoidance systems, having the ultra rich not paying their fair share, while people in our communities are working multiple jobs and still are unable to make ends meet. And so we have people in our communities that are paying too much taxes, and people in the positions who can't afford it not paying enough. And that money can go back into our communities, into the essential things that we need and deserve as Canadians, like affordable housing and healthcare. I get this personally. I'm a single mom with 2 kids and understand full well what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck and still not being able to make ends meet. So it's so important that we have somebody in Parliament that understands what's happening in our communities, understands firsthand what it's like to be in our communities, and is pushing for real solutions for people in our communities.
Are there any specific things from your time in Parliament over the last 4 years you would point to people and say, this is what I, Lisa Marie Barron, have achieved. This is why you should send me back there to continue to work on me?
Absolutely. While I was elected in the NDP in Parliament, we were a small but mighty group. So there was 25 of us. And what we were able to accomplish working across party lines. So through the Supply and Confidence Agreement, through being able to leverage our power with the Liberals, we were able to deliver dental care to 1.5 million people already to date. And I can't the amount of people that are coming up to me in the community and are sharing with me the real impacts on their lives of how they were unable to access dental care for years and years. I had one woman with a toothache that she had to live with for years because she couldn't afford to go to the dentist because, she was on a fixed pension income. And at the end of the month, she just didn't have money left over to be able to go to the dentist. So being able to go and access this essential health care. And we're seeing that expanding again as well. So it'll be going out to more people and being available to more people across Canada. Pharmacare is another big win. We live in Canada. We should not have to pay with a credit card for our medications that are life-saving. I think about people living with diabetes, for example, who are paying $600, $700, $800 a month in order to access life-saving medications and devices. And so now we're seeing, because the province has stepped up and signed an agreement with the federal government as well. And we're going to be seeing the pharmacare program rolling out to people living with diabetes to make sure that they have access to the medications they deserve. $10 a day childcare. I can't emphasize again how important this is. As a single mom, I know full well how hard it is to work so hard and to have the additional challenges of trying to find affordable, accessible, quality childcare for children. So the $10 a day childcare, again, was another big win from the work that we have done. There's still more that I could talk about, and there's still more work to be done to make sure that it is expanded and it, providing it to more people in our communities. So, this is just some of the examples of what the NDP can do, has a proven track record of doing, and will continue to do moving forward.
Are riding locally here in Nanaimo. Various polls have suggested that there are 4 parties really in play with significant support, close to at least 20% in each of their cases. Some kind of smart voting strategic websites have even suggested that perhaps in this election, the Green Party vote could be the quote unquote strategic vote. How do you respond to that situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to point out that the Greens put out polls last election saying that they were going to sweep the riding and that they were going to win. And they came in 3rd place. And obviously, because I'm the incumbent MP, I won the last election. And the same thing's happening again with these polls that are being put out. The polls said last election that I was going to lose, but you know how I knew that I had a good chance was that I was out talking to people from morning until night, knocking on doors. And it was about halfway through the last election that I started feeling a real momentum change where people were answering their doors and saying, move along, you've got my support, I'm voting for you. A lot of support out there. And so I knew that the polls were wrong last election, and I know that the polls are wrong again this election. There is so much support out there. Every door that I'm going to, people are talking about the NDP and the Conservatives. The NDP has a strong level of support here in this riding. And absolutely, there has been some bleeding from the Greens and from the Liberals, but there is no denying that the only party that is able to beat the Conservatives, people are worried about Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives and the cuts making things so much worse. The only party that can beat the Conservatives here in Nanaimo-Ladysmith is the NDP. And so
what do you base that assertion on?
Exactly what I'm talking about. I'm out talking to people in the community. What a better source than actually being in the community, talking with the people on the door. And when I'm at doors, this isn't selectively picking and choosing who I want to talk to. This is I'm going to doors in the community. I don't know who's going to be on the other side when I talk to people. And I will tell you that the momentum is there, that there is a ton of support out there. And there's just no way that the polls are representative of what's happening in our communities when I can talk to people, hundreds of doors, and the Greens will come up 1 or 2 times. So how does that make sense? What we know to be true is that the NDP has a huge amount of support, and the NDP is the party to make sure that Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives are not representing here in this riding, because there's just too much at stake to see that happen.
You've brought up a number of issues so far. One thing we haven't talked about yet is what's going on south of the border. How do you view that situation? How do you see that impacting the race, and what's your stance?
Well, first, we see Trump's chaos and everything that he has. Trump is a convicted felon and has been causing chaos every step of the way. He's unpredictable. We never know what's going to come. And people here in Canada are rightfully worried. A couple of thoughts around that is that the first thing is, talking to people at the door, you cannot. So many people, when I go to the door, are talking to me about the fact of how worried they are about Trump making things so much worse for them. And they're also pointing out to me the similarities between the behaviors, the things that are being said, the mannerisms, just, the fact that here in Canada, we have our very own Trump 2.0. And this is being pointed out to me over and over and over again. And so we need to be very aware of the tactics that are being used. We have Pierre Poilievre that's saying that he's on the side of workers, saying that he's on the side of families in our communities, but we know we can look at the things that he's doing today and also at the record that he will continue to line the pockets of the ultra rich, surround himself by his billionaire friends, the exact same things as Trump is doing right now. And so, everything that Trump is doing right now has been a real eye opener for people here in Canada. To the fact that we have to be paying attention to what's happening here in Canada, but also it has brought people together like I've never seen before, united behind stopping Trump and stopping Poilievre and making sure that we are standing up for all that we hold dear as Canadians. We've
talked a little bit about the idea of polls locally. I'm wondering about polls nationally. If people see reporting that suggests maybe the NDP could be down as low as 9% in the vote intention, maybe even related to some of what you have just talked about, what would your message around that be to people in Nanaimo-Ladysmith?
Well, the message is that the NDP is always underestimated in the polls, and we always deliver much better than what they show. Look at just what happened here in this riding of Nanaimo-Ladysmith, the last provincial election just 6 months ago, where people were saying that the Conservatives were going to take this riding. Polls were supporting that in many ways. And now we have 3 MLAs in the riding of Nanaimo-Ladysmith that are all NDP. Also, we know in Ontario, same thing. We saw in the most recent Ontario election where the Conservatives were showing much stronger support in the polls and the NDP did significantly better than the polls were saying. And so I don't think, there's any reason to discount the support and the power of the NDP. And regardless of what those numbers look like in the end, you saw what we could do with 25 members of parliament of the NDP. Imagine what we could do with more of us. We know that we work across party lines to get things done. You could look at the time of our very own, who was representing here for a short time, Tommy Douglas. That was done during a Liberal NDP minority government, and Tommy Douglas worked across party lines to develop and provide Medicare, EI. These are the things now: dental care, pharmacare, child care, national school foods programs. These are the things that the NDP are able to get done because we work to make sure that it happens and are fighting for people every step of the way.
Let's say you do go back to Ottawa. Let's say somehow it's a similar situation to the one this time around in Parliament. If you were pushing for another supply and confidence deal, you were in the caucus meeting, what are the things that you would say, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to achieve, this is what I would say is the situation where I'm going to support a supply and confidence agreement. We need to make it contingent on this.
Well, whether it's a supply and confidence agreement or not, we'll keep on fighting to make sure as an opposition party that we are getting things done for people. And at the core of that is making sure that life is more affordable for people in our communities, pushing for head to toe healthcare, pushing for real climate solutions. So to stop subsidizing big oil and gas, to see our biggest polluters paying their fair share. And then, of course, to see our democracy strengthened. When I was first elected as member of Parliament and I walked into the chamber, it became very evident to me very quickly that the Parliament currently elected is not representative of our communities. Currently, the federal government only has 30% women elected, and that's the highest that it's ever been. And that's not taken into account, of course, the underrepresentation of Indigenous people, people living with disabilities, 2S LGBTQIA. There's still so much work left to be done. We had a federal of course, during Trudeau's time in 2015, when his popularity rose very quickly back then, he campaigned on that election being the last first past the post election. Yet we're still in a first past the post election right now. And so one of my priorities would be making sure that we are strengthening our democracy, that we are looking at true electoral reform so that people's votes can be better represented, and that we can have a parliament that's more representative of our communities to deliver legislation that's a better fit for people in our communities here and really, truly not just doing Band-Aid solutions, but real solutions for people.
Are there any issues that you feel like checking in on the media haven't gotten as much attention, as much oxygen as you would like during this campaign?
Oh, that's a big question. I mean, there's always so many local issues that people are talking about here that we need to stay focused on. Cleaning up the derelict and abandoned vessels is one of them. Loaves and Fishes Food Bank, I was able to secure $5 million, of course, through the government. And then it will continue to be my priority to see those funds delivered to Loaves and Fishes upon, if I were to continue on. And I remain optimistic that I will see that support. And then, of course, the hospital. Right now, we see that the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital is way over capacity. People are going there from the Malahat up, and there just is not the capacity to meet the need. And so it's time that we have the federal government step up, provide infrastructure funding to support the province so that we can see a hospital here in Nanaimo that truly meets the needs of people in our communities.
Lisa Marie Barron, thank you very much for coming to the CHLY studio.
Thanks for taking the time.
Lisa Marie Barron is running for re-election as the NDP candidate in the Nanaimo-Ladysmith Riding.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
This week, we've been bringing you interviews with local candidates in the Nanaimo-Ladysmith Riding. Midcoast Morning made efforts to reach out to all 5 campaigns last week to set up interviews. We didn't hear back from the People's Party. While we did hear back from the campaign of Conservative candidate Tamara Kronis, they were unable to accommodate an interview and suggested it would be possible to get in touch after the campaign. I spoke with University of Guelph professor Julie Simmons about a trend of Conservatives limiting media access throughout this election.
My name is Julie Simmons, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Guelph.
And I have been trying to put together this series of local candidate interviews to air on this program, Midcoast Morning. I would much rather be doing one of those right now, but I have been unable to set up an interview with our local Conservative candidate, and I understand that this has been something of a trend nationwide, and I'm wondering if you could comment on that for me.
Yes, well, I think the first time that all of the rest of us who are not in the media heard about this is when the media began writing that they were not invited to travel, for example, on the same transportation vehicles as the leader of the Conservative Party. And that's unusual. So, and then there was also a limit to how many questions could be asked, for example, which made it also quite frustrating. And there was a lot of gatekeeping around who could ask questions at times when questions were permitted at various campaign stops for the Conservative Party. And while there normally is a little bit of that with all the parties, just so that there is some organization to the events, it has been a bit frustrating because some people asking questions have felt like they have been treated as though they are protesters, and in fact have been referred to as such by the Conservative Party leader, Mr. Polyev, on the campaign trail.
Do you have any sense of why this is happening?
Well, it's interesting because we have seen over time, even dating back to the Harper years, a very controlled approach to the dissemination of messaging from the leader's office and the leader's staff right down to local candidates. And there were times in the past when there was the Canadian Alliance or even the Reform Party and their attempts to come back together with the Progressive Conservative Party and form a united party, when there were a lot of kind of rogue comments made by certain individuals who were affiliated with those parties. And so when the Conservative Party came together under Stephen Harper, he very much controlled the messaging and who could say what, even within his own cabinet. And so in some ways, this is an extension of that. But I think it's also fair to say that Mr. Poilievre is very suspicious of the neutrality of mainstream media and is under the perception that it is not, it has a liberal bias. And when I say liberal, I don't necessarily mean Liberal Party of Canada, but rather liberal in the more general sense. And so in that sense, he feels that some more unconventional approaches to getting his message out through YouTube videos or through, TikTok clips and things like that are ways that he can bypass the media in a sense and speak directly to individual voters. So I think, that's part of a longer trend on the one hand, but it's also part of this sort of populist impulse to be very suspicious of the media. And
the trend seems to extend beyond just media or traditional media outlets. For example, this Tuesday I was at an all-candidates forum at Vancouver Island University here in Nanaimo. 4 out of the 5 candidates who are running in the election were there. The Conservatives were not. Apparently, they told the organizer that they were out there campaigning at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Do you have a sense of why on that forums front they might not be attending?
To be part of an all-party debate?
Yes. So
again, I think it's because it's very difficult to control the exact messaging. So it only takes one candidate to, throw in a line or two that is off script, and then it might make the headlines around the country. And so one way of controlling that is to simply not participate in those kinds of events. And, Mr. Poilievre is a very polished politician, and he is very, very controlled in the language he chooses to use and what he chooses to say. So I think it's an extension of that. I don't think it's particularly healthy for democracy, but I think it's also part and parcel with a form of parliamentary government that we practice where there is very, very strong party discipline. So in other words, parliamentary democracy in the United Kingdom, for example, which is the original parliament, individual MPs have much more freedom to speak, and cabinet ministers, than do our MPs and cabinet ministers in Canada, in the sense that they would never vote against their party or speak out to the media in Canada, that is. And so in some ways, I think we wouldn't necessarily see this outside of Canada even to this degree, because we do practice such strong party discipline within the House of Commons in Canada.
What do you think would be the consequences? And again, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, part of this is speculation on our part that there is some kind of directive from the leadership of the party to candidates not to talk. If that is the case, what would be the consequence if I'm a candidate and I say, no, I really believe it's important to talk to the people who are trying to elect me to represent them, and I kind of go against that and I do start giving interviews?
Well, you'd have to ask Mr. Poilievre that question. I don't know about the internal workings of the Conservative Party. I can only observe it from the outside, like every other voter. But it does unfortunately mean that I guess the Conservative Party is counting on people voting for the party, irrespective of who the local candidate is, because apparently it's not important for local candidates to participate in town hall meetings or debates with other local candidates.
How do you think in this environment journalists can navigate this idea of equitable coverage or balance when, I'm reading the Times Colonist, I'm reading a local outlet here, The Discourse, and I see over and over again, we reached out to the Conservative campaign, we didn't hear back?
Well, I think that the Conservative Party, like I said, is trying to deliver their message in other ways, using social media and speaking directly to voters through YouTube videos. Mr. Poilievre has a very extensive collection of YouTube videos where he wants to come across as a very kind of everyday person and, speak to people about the cost of gas and climate change and, various things. And I think he would prefer to deliver his message that way. And it's a calculation. They're choosing not to, be be covered by certain kinds of media.
What do you think the consequence of that is for our society? Like, I imagine you might even be able to perceive a conversation like this one as almost like confirming what they're saying in a way. So how do you navigate that minefield?
Well, on the one hand, we think of democracy as an opportunity for people with different perspectives to come together and to learn about the perspectives of others through dialogue. And so when we cannot be in the same room and talking to each other, it makes it impossible to develop shared understandings. And so when we can't even get into the same room to have a conversation, then it doesn't leave a lot of room for compromise. And so in that sense, I think it doesn't bode well for there being a united approach to problem solving about anything. I think is a little bit disappointing, because we want to think that regardless of whom we elect to represent us, that they will at least be willing to engage in genuine conversation with the others that are elected to represent us in different constituencies across the country. But it's setting up a much more kind of confrontational approach to messaging.
Is there anything else you think it's important to focus on when we have a conversation around this idea of lack of media access?
Well, I think we need to distinguish between lack of media access at the national level and lack of media access at the local level, because we practice such strong party discipline in Canada. The inability to speak with a local candidate is not necessarily something that can't be overcome. So, for example, it can be overcome by going to the website of the political party itself and reading about their party platform, for example, or finding a national kind of presentation on, like I said, a YouTube video as a way of learning what the political party stands for, because so many people do vote for the political party rather than the specific local candidate and the personalities of that individual. But on the national level, it's a little bit trickier because, like I said, you have to go to the websites of the political parties, and it may be the case that you end up seeing a different kind of media coverage from the other leaders who are willing to directly speak to individuals. I mean, one way that Poilievre chose to engage with the broader public was by appearing on a podcast with Jordan Peterson. He probably reached a lot of Canadians through that approach, but they aren't the same Canadians that are looking to watch the news coverage at the end of the night on television, for example, with a national broadcaster.
What is the role of a local MP in Canada in 2025 in our federal system, where, ostensibly we're electing people to represent ridings of 100 and some thousand people locally? MPs are going to earn a salary of $210,000 close to do that. What can they do?
Well, they can participate in caucus meetings, and in those caucus meetings behind closed doors, they can make points of view known. And if they're cabinet ministers, then of course they would participate in cabinet meetings as well. But once the doors open from a caucus meeting, or once the doors open from a cabinet meeting, there is a united front that is usually presented by the members of a political party, so that they're all sort of singing the same tune when it comes to the point of view of the party on a particular issue.
And you noted that this isn't necessarily the case in the UK. How is it different, and why is it different?
So there is more relaxed party discipline in other places that practice parliamentary democracy. And I use the example of the United Kingdom. So, for example, I lived there for 19 months, and I was surprised on the radio that you would hear a cabinet minister speaking out about a decision that had been made by the government of the day even. And there is a lot more turmoil, because without that collective cabinet solidarity, there tends to be a lot more scheming to overtake the leader of the party that is played out in a more public way. And we have seen the political parties choose different leaders there in ways we haven't seen here. And so when we choose a new political party leader, as we did with Mr. Poilievre, it's a decision that's made by the card-carrying members of the political party across the country. But in the United Kingdom, what could happen, for example, is that the members of parliament in the caucus of that political party take a vote. And so there's a lot more acrimony within the party itself among the MPs and willingness to kind of slip things to the media, speak out against a particular point of view. And we see, a lot more of that there than we would here.
Do you have any idea as to how that evolved, how we got to the place we're in Canada?
How did we get to, that is a very good question. I'd have to think that through how we came to be. And I'm not exactly sure that I know the historical reasons for that. But if anything, I mean, Jeffrey Simpson wrote a book called I might get the title wrong here, but I think it's like the Friendly Dictatorship, to describe the Chrétien years, for example, because when you have elected, a leader of a party and that party forms a majority in the House of Commons, then they have a tremendous amount of power because we practice such strong party discipline.
Well, Julie Simmons, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to me about it today.
That's my pleasure.
Julie Simmons is an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Guelph. You can find our interviews with Paul Manley of the Green Party and Michelle Corfield of the Liberal Party online at chly.ca/midcoastmorning. Election Day is Monday, April 28th. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Fruit is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
This program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.